So one of the things I wanted to kind of dig into a little bit, I know we've all been here at Replicated. We've worked with some customers. Uh, what's one of the more interesting sort of like go-to-market uh, motions or you know insights that you've had around how our customers are actually selling their software to enterprises and positioning it? And I'll start with you, Kurt. What are your thoughts?
Um, so I would say probably some of the more interesting cases are those that have tried to go down that path of going on-prem, modern on-prem as they might define it, or looking to branch into some of those newer on-prem offerings, and that the change in the marketplace of more user-based approach versus the traditional enterprise type platforms. But they recognize that is a trend that is continuing to grow, continuing to pick up momentum, and offering that solution opens up a whole new spectrum of customers that traditionally yield much higher returns for the organization, for their organization.
Yeah, and I would add on to absolutely one of the biggest use cases, but the complexity, especially when we work with some of our customers and they've been on premise before and they're taking their current company from SaaS to on premise, following customers or opening up new addressable markets, like Kurt was saying, they already know the challenges because they've been there. So they're waving the white flag from the very beginning, saying, "Hey, I know that this is going to be a heavy lift for our organization," and then Replicated comes in and makes that process much easier, not only on the implementation piece, but also on the day two side of things as well. Really understanding what's in the customer's environment, allowing them to have self-service back to the organization with support bundles and those types of things. So that's been very interesting. And I would add one other is the air gap. A lot of customers, end users, are really concerned about security, especially some of the federal customers of our end users of our customers, right? So being able to take an environment that's totally on its own and be able to deploy in that and still be able to service that customer is a very big trend that we're seeing as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think for me, if I don't mind answering my own question, which, it's always a fun one to do, I think there's an interesting sort of like set of companies that are coming up that are a little bit younger and that are starting off sort of like self-hosted single tenant first, where that's the primary part of how they plan to sell to larger, governments or larger enterprises. I think about, as our customers examples in this would be folks like GitPod. It's a really great example. I think that there's probably, when I look outside of our customer base, the folks at SourceGraph have talked a lot about this, the fact that they really didn't get much enterprise adoption when they were purely SaaS. And then by going kind of self-hosted single tenant for their application, that's really what drove the growth of their business. And, I think there's even a need, for some of our customers who are doing existing Kubernetes clusters only. So they're not supporting customers who don't want to bring a Kubernetes cluster. And they're saying, hey, look, you can run our application, you can bring it into your own environment, but you have to bring a cluster. So you have to bring a little bit of Kubernetes knowledge in order to do that. It's another really interesting trend that I think we'll see more and more of over time. Ultimately, the real insight here is that the future of enterprise software it's not like black and white. It's not clearly one way or the other, right? It's going to be this sort of shades of gray, lots of different deployment options that you'll need to support for your customers to be successful. Because one customer might be thrilled with the SaaS version, another might want a single tenant hosted, and the third might want it to be, in their VPC, another one want it on-prem, another one might an air gap environment. So there's lots of different customer demands. And luckily with the Kubernetes-based architecture that, Replicated sort of surrounds itself with, but even the entire market is on top of, that's more and more possible today. So that's something I'm really excited to see. Cool. And then, Mark, another question for you in terms of, how do you I guess either of you, do you have any thoughts on how to price if you're a software vendor who maybe this is your first kind of forte into doing on-prem, how do you think about pricing that product? Is it something that you think should be premium priced? Something you should think about doing is penetration pricing? Like what's the best way to sort of position your pricing for this modern on-prem?
I would say the first thing that I would suggest is make sure you understand the value of being able to deliver on-prem for these customers, right? For your end users. So they will pay the amount of money that you're going to put up there. There's always, obviously, there's elasticity in your offering, right? From a pricing standpoint or sensitivity standpoint. But the biggest piece is understand the value. Customers will pay the extra mile for the support, like I say, after the install, but also just the ease of use, coming into the environment from an implementation standpoint. They will see that value and they will pay for it. I mean, we've seen it over and over and over again.
Yeah, I love that. Understand the value. Kurt, any thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. If they're buying on-prem software, regardless of the definition of on-prem, they're buying it for a reason. And they know that there's a value associated with that reason. So do your due diligence, look at your competitors, how saturated is that market, get as much competitive intel as you can, and then price it accordingly.
And maybe even go to some of your top customers, right? Our customers typically will lead us down the path that we should go down, right? So don't be afraid to take some of your champions and ask them the question. They'll lead you.
Great. And how about enabling, a field team to sell something that's delivered through Replicated, right? Like how much do they need to know about Kubernetes? How much do they need to know about this deployment model? How should, someone who's maybe, thinking about, hey, maybe they already have an on-prem product, but now it's going to be a product that's delivered through Replicated. How should they think about, enabling that field team, their sales folks, their customer success folks, their support people, even with knowledge about this shift? What are some best practices or things you've seen there?
I would think that it's really exposing the pain, right? Taking the customer down the journey of what it would be without Replicated, and then the feature benefit for the customer around what it would look like with Replicated. If they understand those pain points and they can identify and get the customer to agree and nod their head, if you will, that's probably the biggest piece that we see is helping our customers understand those pain points and be able to ask the right questions to get the pain out, and then be able to show the path with Replicated in their solution.
Yeah, oftentimes that pain is around, hey, the old version of the on-prem product was a single binary. It didn't scale very well, right? So there's all these scaling problems. So by going to a Kubernetes-based architecture, they're going to get that horizontal scalability, which is really great. Additionally, in the sort of binary model, the end customer was really responsible for bringing a lot of the additional services. So the binary might be managed sort of like by the vendor, but like you might need to bring services for databases, for web servers, for a lot of the other components that are surrounding, and then manage the underlying operating systems. And so I think with these Kubernetes-based architectures, you're really giving the vendor the ability to sort of to describe in a machine-readable language how the application is operated and deliver those manifests, that have that knowledge to a cluster. That way, like the end user doesn't have to be as knowledgeable about the specific application. They can be more knowledgeable about Kubernetes, running Kubernetes, and Kubernetes can manage the applications automatically. So that's one really key area. Another piece for the pain that we see is, these traditional sort of on-prem software products are just hard to update. They're hard to do much with. They're hard to support. So, and oftentimes they're sort of there's these bespoke, management solutions around them. These very custom. There might be some custom orchestration, some custom work that's happening, and so it's really hard for an end customer to get in there and actually like make adjustments or change how what happens with ingress or egress. And with Kubernetes being kind of a standard platform, they can bring some of that Kubernetes knowledge and then have that apply to the applications. So again, it's more of a standard, the lingua franca of sort of modern operations versus like, now I have to go learn, how to run this application, learn how to run this application. I often refer to it as like, there was an operations tax per application. And now you pay like a platform fee, right? To run and to understand Kubernetes. And then every incremental third-party application that you want to add on there is much, much smaller in terms of cost. So that's a big area for the pain. And then the final piece is, as the software vendors look to do both, maybe I'm a traditional on-prem software vendor, but I've been working on some products to offer as a SaaS version, or maybe I've created a new team to build a SaaS version of that product. And so I've had two different, products, one of which is kind of an old legacy on-prem, and one is my SaaS product. Now, by using something like Replicated, they can take that new product that has all the new features, right? So the pain here being this, the old customers aren't getting the updated versions. They're not getting the latest and greatest in terms of features and value from the product. And so by taking that new architecture, the new application, and sort of replacing that traditional on-prem software product, the customer is going to get a lot more value from the product because, hey, it's modern integrations, it's modern code, it's faster, it does more. So that's the other kind of bucket of pain that I see oftentimes in these scenarios. And we've really helped our customers address that with their customers, how to message that. Oftentimes they'll announce, hey, we're releasing a new version of the architecture, because there is some work to repave 500 on-prem deployments. But if you can position the value to Mark's point against that pain, you really can convince customers this is a worthwhile step to take. And this is, it's just part of where the future is going, right? Hey, how do we get there? How do we get this to run more efficiently, run better, run more, like I can do bin packing, I can do other things that really make a difference. So thanks for highlighting the pain. And Kurt, do you want to add anything to this one?
I was going to say that Vladimir actually asked a question, and so I'll read the question, and we'll let you answer first this time. So imagining I'm a new vendor, what's the best way to identify that Replicated is the right solution for the software? How do I assess existing customers for their readiness and for the Replicated solution?
Yeah, it's a great question. Okay, so assessing existing customers and if Replicated is the right solution, there's a combination of we think about it as a spectrum of different customer requirements. So some of your customers might not have any Kubernetes knowledge, and Replicated provides an embedded Kubernetes experience for those customers who just want to install onto a single VM or maybe a couple of VMs and tie them together to make a cluster, but they don't have the Kubernetes expertise. So Replicated has a solution for them. Replicated also has a solution for customers who are pretty familiar with Kubernetes, maybe want a little bit of hand-holding. So that's kind of our COTS product with the UI that's going to install into their cluster and then help them set the application up and then manage a lot of the sort of more complicated parts of managing a commercial third-party application. And that's all open source. So everything that Replicated produces that runs in your customer environment is completely open source. The third part, and for the really advanced end user that has a ton of Kubernetes experience, is running a bunch of Helm charts, we actually now, with a new alpha feature, will expose a new Helm compatible registry with your application as a Helm chart. And so your customers can say, hey, I just want to use the Helm CLI to install this application. And they can, because we're going to expose, a Helm, like an OCI compatible registry with all of your application that licenses can pull from, that preflights can run against, and actually provide that customer with a slightly adjusted set of install instructions, just like the sort of novice customer, the intermediate, and then the advanced, and give them the tools that they need to actually run the install. So hopefully, you're not necessarily assessing if they're ready for Replicated. You're trying to just assess, are they novice, intermediate, or advanced, and then picking which install method is going to be best for them. And then, in terms of, is Replicated the best solution for your software? So the way that we talk about this is, do you have either existing, on-prem customers, right? So you have demand already, or do you have, incoming demand from new customers that you're trying to sell to? That's one key criteria. And then is your application Kubernetes based? So if you're not yet on Kubernetes, like then honestly, you should just go down that path. And if you don't want to use Kubernetes, Replicate is not the right partner for you. But ultimately, we think all software will land on Kubernetes as the foundation. And so if you start to build your application into Kubernetes, that's when Replicated can really help you deliver that to customers. And so again, if it can run on Kubernetes, it can pretty much run in Replicated. We can do operators, we can do Helm charts, we can do standard Kubernetes manifest. Doesn't really matter. So and you can do stateful services, or keep the stateful services external into a customer supplied RDS instance or some type of externally managed database. You could have the customer manage ingress. You can package ingress. There's a lot of different options that we provide. One of the interesting things on Replicated, it is a bit of a it's a bit of a foot gun in there, because we expose so much of the raw power of Kubernetes that we're not going to stop you from doing something that you shouldn't do. We try to lint and provide you some guidance around like where you might make mistakes. But Replicated is going to be the right choice if your application meets those requirements. If your customers kind of sound like either intermediate, novice, or advanced, and then and you have that demand for on-prem, because Replicated ultimately is a pretty specific and niche tool to solve for the distribution of commercial applications. And so you really have to think about this as like an investment in how you're going to operationalize and how you're going to scale the delivery of those applications.
Does that
Vladimir, if you want to share Oh, your audio is not coming through very well, Vladimir.
I can't hear you.
Oh, good. Well, you type it in, we can answer it, or we can catch up later. You can always shoot me an email. I'm just grant@replicated.com. We're always happy to chat and dig into specifics, because, the one thing that we know is that no application is alike. And so there's always some nuance we want to dig into. But the other thing that we've noticed over time is that, every customer kind of thinks that their application is a very unique snowflake. And while that is true, we also sort of have built out and seen a lot of the same patterns to help customers of all different shapes and sizes make this possible. Great. We'll give a second for any other questions, then we can keep jumping around. So Kurt, I guess what are you most excited about for Replicated in 2023?
Ooh, in 2023, well, with some of the organizational changes that you mentioned at the very start of this, the sales org that Mark and I oversee is very focused on the market, the customer base, and so getting the right customers on board with us that ensure success. So monitoring our success by the success of our customers, I think, is just going to enable us to really take off in 2023 by watching them grow rapidly and us as well. That's the most exciting part for me.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mean, getting customer obsession, I think, I look at this and I reflect kind of back on where we were in 2021. I think we just got a little bit caught up in the market hype, and we were focused on company building and not on making customers incredibly successful. And so we're lucky to have, a really healthy war chest, a lot of cash, and give ourselves the time to actually, step back, reassess, and make the right choices here going forward, and make sure that we don't get caught up in that in the irrational exuberance that I think was flowing through the market in 2021. So,
yep.
How about you, Mark? What are you excited about for 2023?
Yeah, definitely the focus on existing customers, as Kurt was saying. There's also a couple of things that we're not at liberty to share yet, but we have a couple of projects internally, actually discussing again today, that's going to be super focused on making sure our customers, existing customers, fully understand the platform, adopt it at a quicker manner, as well as new customers coming onto the platform, helping them accelerate to their first customer installs as well. So got some really good things coming. So stay tuned. Those things will be announced here pretty soon. But that's why I'm excited. I know our value is really truly understanding our customer needs and helping them get to where they need to be to achieve their goals as fast as possible. So I think we're going to be really aligned even better in the next fiscal year.
Yep.
Yeah, I've seen the value that we create for many of our customers, and it is significant. And so I think being able to, one, share that value that we've created and make sure that everybody's kind of aware of how much value we've generated within each customer. And we've talked about, I've been kind of sketching things out about how to expose some of that value that we've generated for customers so that they can see it, and using a lot of our reporting and our data insights to actually feed that information back. I think it's going to be a really nice way to show people what we're doing. So